The brain is a pretty amazing organ, and when we understand how it works, we're able to do amazing things that seemed almost impossible before. That is the power of neuroscience. And by the end of this episode, you'll know how to unlock the secrets to the brain to boost your performance and do your best work. Today's guest is Larry Olsen. Larry is a performance-driven neurology specialist and the founder of Aperneo, where he helps leaders and organizations rewire their thinking to unlock sustainable high performance. He's worked with Fortune 500 executives, entrepreneurs, and teams to overcome limiting beliefs, build resilience, and lead with clarity and purpose. And he's the author of Get a Vision and Live It. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I share new episodes and other tips for managers every week. Now, here's my conversation with Larry. Thank you so much for joining me today, Larry. I'm super excited to talk about neuro brain stuff and how all that gray matter in there impacts how we show up and do our work every single day. So thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. So I want to just lay some groundwork because your work is a little different than I think how most of us and most people I talk to on the show have come to their insights. I mean, you're a neuroscientist in addition to being an amazing coach and speaker and all those other things. So can you kind of talk a little bit about what is neuroscience performance?
Actually, it's a blending of neuroscience and cognitive psychology, explaining why we do what we do day in and day out, whether it's good for us or not. And once individuals begin to understand the relationship between mind and brain, which I get into some pretty clear and easy to understand definitions of both, not that people don't already understand it. But that's part of the challenge is people understand it based on their experiences and their reading and their knowledge. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it's being conveyed, which is one of the greatest challenges that leaders have and managers have in communicating with their people. They think their people are actually understanding what they're sharing. And the facts are that when we're talking to someone, they hear 100% of what we're sharing. And if they're really listening, they understand less than 18%. So that's 82% of the information that's gone, which is why there's meetings after the meeting and all of the other things that are so frustrating for a manager. So one of the things that managers need to learn how to do is to recognize that don't share any information until you're sure you have an audience. And just because you have people in front of you does not mean you have an audience. You could get bobbleheads. And a lot of times what happens to the brain, it sees someone go like this. Do you understand? They go like that. And then the brain goes, okay, they get it. And it doesn't allow us to ask follow-up questions to better understand their take on what it was we shared. And interestingly enough, it's one of the most missed opportunities that leaders and managers have when they're dealing with people and attempting to create an environment where they can be as successful as they possibly can be.
Oh my gosh, I've definitely had those bobblehead moments where I've said something and people nod at me and I go, okay, great, let's keep going. And then you realize, nope, did not work out. Okay, but I want to go back for a second because you said it's important to understand the difference between the brain and the mind. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. To keep it real simple, the mind, think of the mind as all of the thoughts that you have. And how many of those thoughts did you think of on purpose, and how many of them were just being reiterated in your head? And those thoughts accumulate to build belief because we think with words, and those words trigger pictures, and those pictures bring about emotion, and that emotion causes us to take action. Whether it's in the best interest of another or ourselves is immaterial, because this is where we get into the brain now. The brain is a phenomenal organ that we were all blessed with when we popped out of the womb. And it was standard operating equipment, so we all got one. And it took hundreds of thousands of years to develop, or 6 days, whatever philosophy you have on what makes best sense to you. But the fact is, we all have one. And what it does, neuroscience calls it a servo mechanism. Are you familiar with servo mechanism?
I'm not.
Yeah, you will be. A servo mechanism is a robot. It does literally what it's programmed to do. The brain does not not care whether you're putting yourself down or another, or lifting yourself up or another. It's going to follow that information. And what happens is, and then we act accordingly, not to what's possible for us and the people that we manage, but to the beliefs we've already established working with these individuals day in and day out. And we don't even know that we're storing this information. So here's a great example. Somebody shows up late for a meeting. Now, if you ask most managers or leaders, how did that make you feel? Most of them said annoyed or disrespected or whatever. And then I ask, how many times do you think the brain, not the mind, which is explaining everything, it's that conversation we have going on 24/7. How many times does the brain need to see somebody being late before they label that person not punctual? And it's only once. Okay, now the mind can go, oh, something must have happened. I can't wait to find out later on, or I'm going to talk to that person. We're going to see that never happens again. Whatever philosophy and style of leadership they've had imposed upon them, or they've studied, whatever the case may be, and now they behave accordingly. Here's what's interesting. 2 weeks later, that person, you have another meeting, that person shows up on time. Do you know somebody in the group will get sarcastic? What, did your watch break? What happened? What do you mean what happened? Well, you're here on time. And so this is what's so important for leaders and managers to know if they want to really create an environment where they have engaged, sustainable associates. Because like Gallup shares with us, 3 out of 4 are staring at the screen. 3 out of 4 are disengaged, and they don't need to be. But so what happens now is this individual who was late and now shows up on time, it doesn't seem to matter whether they're late or on time. It still isn't acceptable. And this is where the brain loves predictability. That's what it's all about. And its greatest support system is the amygdala, the reptilian brain, which is there to make sure that we continue to propagate the species and survive as a species. So what it does is it stores information that has put us into jeopardy. And that could be somebody saying, why'd you do that? That can trigger the amygdala, the reptilian brain, and it puts us into a fight, flight, freeze mechanism. And this is unfortunate because when the amygdala takes over, our frontal lobes, which allow us to be able to forecast and make decisions and plan, are shut down. Because we don't want to think and ask ourselves, is that a tiger out there? That person just flipped, the chair over and, I'm going to get into defensive posture. I'm not going to go, you know what? I wonder really what was going on in that person's morning to get them to a point where they felt compelled to throw that chair. It's just a reaction that's so fast that it takes our conscious mind a half a second to a second and a half to realize we already made our mind up. And this is why neuroscience says, and when you understand the science, you begin to recognize it, that 95% of our day we are unconscious. This is a really key point. We are just reacting to every situation. Okay? And then we think we are making decisions, but what are we basing the decisions on? What's possible or what's already taken place stored neurologically in the cell of our brain? And what we find out is most people make decisions about the present and the future based on the past. So that's why when the guy comes in on time, I remember from the past that he was late. So that's a discrepancy which gets our attention. Now, a great leader and a great manager, when someone's late, they realize, as soon as this meeting's over, I got to find out what's going on, what happened, what took place, because I know that they're a great associate and they really want to bring out the best. But what if they've developed an attitude about that person? And all that lateness did was add to it on that report that didn't show up on time either. And so the brain is really good, and we can remember that growing up. Sometimes when you got in trouble, not only did you get scolded for that, but all the other 10 things that you'd done. And now our brain has taken over. So one of the things leaders need to do is they need to recognize that. I'm going to give you a brain hack. And a brain hack is simply taking thousands of years of research and information and condensing it into a sentence or two. And here it is. Do you believe that it's important to change if you're going to grow, or to change if the company needs to change if it's going to grow?
Absolutely.
Here's a brain hack for you. 99.9% of people, when they attempt to make a change the wrong way.
Whoa. Okay.
And
What is happening there?
yeah, well, all the studies show that 500 people who are really committed to make the change. No, seriously, I'm going to make it today. No, I learned a lot about, and I'm going to go and I'm going to put that into action. Out of 500, how many do you think are able to sustain that change for 1 year?
Oh, like maybe one.
Yeah, two. And here's the rest of the brain hack. 99.9% of people who attempt to change the wrong way because they attempt to change their behavior. I'm going to be nicer now. I'm going to sit up straighter when I enter a room. You know what I'm going to do? You follow me? I'm going to change my behavior, which is already pre-programmed and comes natural to me. But I found out, though, that it's offensive. Or I found out it's really important that I go around and I talk to my people in the morning. But if the authenticity isn't there, if the ownership isn't there, it comes across as just a leader checking a box off that I talk to my people. And I've seen leaders maybe walk by two other associates to say good morning to the third one. And I don't, you know as well as I do, they didn't do that on purpose, but the brain says, there's Becky, I'm going to go say good morning to her, and didn't realize what happened to the others who got passed by. And morale and performance match. Lower morale, lower performance. Raise morale, raise performance. So I don't want to give you a drink out of a fire hose, so I'll slow down a little bit and see if you have any questions or comments.
Well, I love this insight, and there's so many things you said that I want to pull on. One being how much of our day we're just kind of going through in auto mode without even realizing it and thinking that we're actually thinking, but it's not. So there's a lot of stuff in there that I'm very curious about. And then this last piece around changing the wrong thing. I mean, as an executive coach, so much of what I do with my clients is focus on their behavior. And now I'm thinking, wait a second, am I focusing on the wrong thing? And if it's not the behavior, then what is it we should be focusing on?
Good question. And I'm very impressed at what a great listener you are. That's a rare commodity. We would all like to think we're good listeners, but most of us listen long enough to see what the problem is. And then we go in for the fix, especially managers and leaders. And as soon as we figure the problem out, we're no longer listening to them. We're listening to us. Think about what we're going to say as soon as we find a pause that we can jump in on. So let's go back to finishing that brain hack and answer the question about, because we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, that old concept, if you will. You don't have to change anything. Behavior is really what we get to focus on. But here's how it goes. 99% of people who attempt to change the wrong way because they attempt to change their behavior because they haven't learned how to change their mind. And mind is where we learn about what are called dendritic connections that form over time because we reiterate something in our mind, even though it's already taken place. And then what happens is we create what's called a neural network. And a neural network, best way to understand them are habits, attitudes, beliefs, or expectations, all of which drive behavior. And so this is where neuroplasticity comes in. Because if you go into just about any high school biology lab and then you ask for their book and look up the brain, unless they've invested a lot of money in buying new textbooks, it says the brain is fixed. And now we've discovered just now is like within the last 20 years, it would be now in brain science, something called neuroplasticity. You've probably heard of neuroplasticity. What that means is you can create a new neural network. That means that I saw this person as late, and in order not to continue to see them as late, I need to see them as punctual. I need to see them as someone who really wants to bring out the best in themselves and others. I need to own it. It's not enough just to want to act like that, because now we're working on behavior. I need to own it in my mind. And this is where visualization, this is where vision statements come into play. I don't like to use the term affirmation, because I think affirmation is just one of those, if I say this enough times, then, but if I don't understand the science, then I'm just trying something else again. Does that make sense?
It does.
Hoping my behavior changes. So when we as leaders, when I work with leaders, one of the first things I find out is, what are their beliefs about their people? Because that is where the opportunity lies. Because here you have this remarkable human being that popped out of the womb with over 100 billion neurons, each one capable of processing 3 to 5 million bits of information. And it wasn't a cosmic joke. We are absolutely remarkable. And that old adage, whatever you can conceive, you can achieve, is the truth. But what happens to people is they try something and it doesn't work, so then they don't believe it anymore. And what really happened is they tried something. Instead of saying that doesn't work, they said, I don't work. I'm not comfortable around people. I'm not comfortable speaking in front of groups. I'm really not comfortable. And then they can just fill in the blanks. And so what they do is then they get some advice and they go, okay, I need to take a class on being more comfortable. Well, you're not going to get anything out of the class if you haven't changed the belief about you're still uncomfortable. But maybe the class will fix it. Change the belief, change your life.
I love this so much. And it's making me think about just an experience I had last night. We were hosting an event in our home with 80 people. I think I knew like 4 of them. We were celebrating an opening of a new play. And
Oh.
I love talking to people, but that initial like starting conversation with strangers it's always a little awkward. And like, I know all the right things to say. Like I've done that plenty of times, I know. And so I've recently started telling myself, I'm the kind of host who welcomes everyone in my home. I'm the kind of host who talks to people and initiates conversation. And it has made hosting events like this so much easier because my own self-talk has changed. And while it's still like that little bit irky, it is significantly different. I've been hosting people for years, and it wasn't until I changed my self-talk around how this event is going to go tonight that I saw a significant kind of reduction in my anxiety of when people started showing up. And it wasn't because they were in my home. It was simply just because I was like, okay, I feel ready to engage with everyone. And it's so powerful.
Beautiful. And what you did is and this is really critical. This is something that I discovered probably because of the accumulation of all the years that I've been involved in this. And that is that we're so concerned about how we're doing, we forget why we're up there. That we're not up there to see how we're doing. That we're up there to create value for those in the room so that they can improve the quality of their own lives.
Yes.
And you make that shift like you did. It's natural to be uncomfortable. For crying out, your amygdala's on. But what you want to do is you want to get a kick out of it instead of getting kicked down by it, and realize that it's getting you ready to be the best version of yourself. And when you change your mind about how you feel, then the feeling doesn't have the same meaning to it. And pretty soon the calming effect starts to take place, because once you give the amygdala a reason not to have to come to your aid, you can then start reasoning again. Mm-hmm. Because, and here's what's so cool. The brain doesn't know the difference between what you imagine and what actually is happening to you. It doesn't care. If you reiterate it or talk about it, and we all know this, we've all heard this 1,000 times, but think about the science behind this. It's not what happens to you that causes you to feel the way you do, but how you talk to yourself about what's happening to you. And like you said, that self-talk, I call it rocks talk. And I've TM'd it. It's a process of what happens neurologically when we have a conversation with ourselves. And ROX stands for Register One Experience. And X, I did a little poetic license with X.
Mm-hmm.
So with our rocks talk, every time we talk to ourselves, we're dropping a rock in a bucket. And that bucket is where we're building neurological patterns. And so if I say I'm uncomfortable speaking in front of groups, I drop a bucket. I drop a rock under the label speaking in front of groups. And what happens is I start to convince myself I'm uncomfortable speaking in front of groups. Well, of course we are. The number one fear of a man is rejection. Because if, and people go, I'm too much of a people pleaser. You can't be too much of a people pleaser. The only time you're too much of a people pleaser is where you're not attending to yourself. Because we're supposed to socialize. We can't keep the species going if we don't interact with one another. So it's such a fear to be ostracized or to be judged or to be put down. And so what people do is they do it all by themselves. They judge, they ostracize, and they put themselves down. Here I go again. I can't believe I did that. How could I have been so stupid? And they don't recognize they're telling the brain, all right, now look for other reasons why I can be stupid. Because the brain, here's the job of the brain, maybe. The brain would rather have you be right than successful.
Whoa.
It's called sanity. So when you've got an employee that you're working with that all of a sudden goes beyond your expectations, instead of going, rock on, let's develop that, you're going, what happened? Because the brain's saying, warning, warning, this is not the behavior you're used to. Same thing in our own lives. When things start to go too well for us, some of us start to wonder, when is a wheel going to fall off? When's something going to happen? This is just too good. See, we've outrun our belief, and all of our leaders have beliefs about all of their people, whether they got it in the onboarding process or they worked and interacted with the person, and then they've paid attention to their behavior without knowing it caused them to build beliefs about them, and now their brain is now on alert to just look for that information. We can't even see anything that doesn't match our beliefs.
Wow. So it sounds like the most important thing that we need to do then is change our beliefs and change our mindset. So what are some of the ways beyond shifting our self-talk? And is it really just come down to like noticing the opposites so we can kind of rebuild that data set? What else are we supposed to be doing?
Well, as I'm sure you're aware, the first step of change is awareness. Okay. I remember going to a party one time when I was younger, and I couldn't understand why people were reacting the way they were to me. They were standoffish. They were looking at me strangely. I wasn't quite sure what it was. And then about 3 hours into the party, this guy comes up to me and he goes, Larry. And I go, what? And he goes, you have spinach in your teeth.
Oh.
And was I upset with him for telling me I had spinach in my teeth? No, I was grateful. I was upset with everybody else that didn't come up and tell me. You're looking like a fool, man, like you don't have a front tooth. I mean, it was ridiculous. But here's the point. Once I was made aware of it, I could do something about it. And the unfortunate thing is most leaders and managers don't know the right approach to talk to people about things that they're doing that are counterproductive. They label them tough conversations. Now, tell your brain you're about to have a tough conversation. And what have you just alerted it to? Most comfortable experience you've ever had?
Definitely
you see what I
not.
mean? A lot of our learnings are counterintuitive. We know that we need to reinforce the behaviors we want to continue to see. But what are annual reviews all about? We take a look at where they're falling short. Dr. Gary Latham out of Toronto University did a study of hundreds of organizations and corporations in America who did annual reviews. And here's what he found out. At the end of the review, it took another 6 months for the employee's performance to get up to what it was before the review.
What?
So what did we talk about during the review?
All the bad things,
Maybe,
right?
maybe
Not enough good things.
yeah, maybe let's sit down for a minute. I want to talk about some opportunities I think are in store for you. I don't care how you sugarcoat it. You know what we're going to talk about. And it triggers the amygdala. It creates defensiveness in you. And it's not the 360 that we need to throw away. It's our approach and how we implement it. And that's what's so cool about this education I'm sharing with you is we don't have to throw everything out because we've made a lot of investment in it. And your coaching and talking about behavior is absolutely critical. But then it's what do we do about it?
And connecting those behaviors to the right mindset
Right.
that
What's
matters.
causing it? Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we have to start to wrap up. So, Larry, can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
Yeah, I when my first client 30 years ago, and I started my own business 30 years ago in May of last month. And he called me up and he told me that he didn't think that he needed someone like me in his organization because he already had a great team. They were number 8 in the country out of 2,400 other organizations that sold the same product. I said, great team, huh? And this is where we don't recognize how amazingly intelligent we are when we allow ourselves to just be ourselves. And what is ourselves? It's this remarkable human being that's been given this gift called life. The chances of being alive are 1 in 400 trillion. And any statistician will say that's zero. But here we are having this conversation right now. And the gift we get is life. So when he said, I don't know if we need you in this company, you already have a great team. And I said, well, let me ask you this. When you were growing up and they were picking teams in the neighborhood, I bet you were the captain. And he goes, well, how'd you know? And well, duh, right? And I said, so how do you think those kids that got picked first felt? And he goes, well, they felt great. And I said, how do you think the kids who got picked last felt? There's a pause maybe over the phone. And he said, how do I get you into my company? Because he was all about making sure everyone, regardless of when they got picked or what their opinion of themselves were, had an opportunity to be miraculous. And he believed in me so much that I wanted to exceed his expectations.
Oh, love this story. And I love that last statement. Just when we believe in our people so much, it makes them want to exceed our expectations. So powerful. And where can people learn more about you and keep up with your work?
The website is larryolsen.com. And I've got a book out called Get a Vision and Live It, how to be able to really transform and change your mind. You can get that through Amazon or directly contact us. A huge social media presence. If they want to get little free 60-second hits on what happens when I say this is hard, what does the brain do? And there's just a ton of those. And there's all kinds of information, YouTube channel and LinkedIn. So any avenue that they're already using. The Instagram is Larry Olsen Live. That's pretty much the easiest way. They can also get coaching. They can go to the online, our website and find out about that as well.
Fabulous. And I will give a shout out to your blog. I spent a lot of time digging through your articles and they are fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You're really good at what you do. I am so impressed.
Oh, thank you. Well, the feeling's mutual. So
Well,
thank you
thank
again
you.
so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.